Okay, so bonjour et bienvenue à l'Alliance Française de Chicago. My name is Adeline Guimard. I'm the executive director of what is also known as the Place for All Things French in Chicago. Today is such a special day. We are absolutely thrilled to be partnering with our friends at Driehaus Museum on this spectacular event, Hector Guimard's Designs for Living, a forum for new research and ideas. I hope you're ready, because this is an all-day, all-art nouveau event, and it is featuring no less than 6 international experts in their field who will be sharing their new research. I'm the artist who is perhaps most famous for his metro entrances à Paris, but then there's so much more. So this morning we will have the first of 3 presentations by our 3 distinguished speakers, David Hanks, Sarah Coffin, and Nicolas Horiot. They will be followed by a panel discussion and a Q&A, and at that point will bring us up to noon. We'll all break for lunch to do on your own, and then we'll reconvene at 1:30. So, a reminder, always a little housekeeping, please turn off your phones, and if for any reason you need to exit during the presentations, just go out the back and return by the back door. Thank you very much. So today's program is made possible by Driehaus Museum, also the Jean Bodfish Brown Memorial Fund. We're very, very grateful. And we offer a special thanks to Jan and John Notes for their generosity. So, nous les remercions du fond du cœur. We thank them from the bottom of our hearts. And now, to tell you a lot more about these speakers is Lisa Key, the Executive Director of the Driehaus Museum. Let's give her a warm welcome.
Merci, Mary-Ellen. And I first want to start by thanking you and all of your colleagues at the Alliance. We are truly very blessed to be in partnership with the Alliance today, and I know that Elizabeth Cummings, our Director of Public Engagement, who has organized this incredible day, joins me in thanking all of the staff for their great attention to this partnership. This is actually a partnership that is not just about today, but has extended through the entirety of the run of Hector Guimard at the Driehaus Museum, so we are very proud. The Driehaus Museum is indeed thrilled to organize today's symposium. The exhibition Hector Guimard reveals new research about Hector Guimard and his movements and his role in the Art Nouveau movement. We as a museum are dedicated to new research, thought, and ideas, and it is central to our strategic plan moving forward. The exhibition Hector Guimard, Art Nouveau to Modernism, was co-organized by the Driehaus Museum and the Cooper Hewitt Smithsonian Design Museum. Yet another partnership. There's a trend here with what the Driehaus is doing. And this exhibition was ably curated by David Hanks in partnership with Sarah Coffin, who's here today. So thank you both so much. This exhibition presents a new view of the influence of Hector Guimard, and we are thrilled to really go in depth today on this research and to talk about it with various experts who have joined us. I want to remind you all that admission to the museum is free this entire weekend, and with your attendance today, we hope you will see the exhibition if you have not. The museum is open until 5 o'clock today, but I know you're not leaving here to go see it, but we're also open tomorrow from 11 a.m. to 5. So I encourage you to attend and join us so you can see this wonderful exhibition. As a final note before introducing our panelists, I just want to really remind ourselves that Hector Guimard lived and worked during a time of war and conflict, and in fact fled Europe to the United States because of it. As we face international conflicts again today, sadly we see history repeating itself, and with conflicts again presenting a moment for us to reflect. So with that, I'd like to turn to kicking off our morning with our speakers. Nicolas Horiot is an architect and president of the Cercle Guimard. The goal of the Cercle Guimard is to promote Hector Guimard both in France and throughout the world. It is a membership organization, and I know that many of you in the room may be members or may be interested in becoming members, so I encourage you to think about it and do so. Nicolas himself is an architect, trained architect, having studied at the École d'Architecture de Paris, La Villette, and he is a preeminent collector of the work of Hector Guimard. Welcome. Sarah Coffin is an independent consultant, curator, lecturer, and decorative arts and architectural historian who retired as senior curator and head of the product design and decorative arts department at Cooper Hewitt Smithsonian Design Museum. Prior to Cooper Hewitt, she was vice president specialist at Sotheby's, becoming the firm's decorative arts representative. Earlier professional roles were at the Metropolitan Museum of Art and the Victoria and Albert Museum. Welcome, Sarah. And finally, David Hanks, a good friend to the museum. Has extensive experience in the museum field, including curatorial positions at the Art Institute of Chicago and the Philadelphia Museum of Art. Recent exhibition projects include Louis Comfort Tiffany, Treasures from the Richard H. Driehaus Collection, Partners in Design, Alfred H. Barr Jr. and Philip Johnson, and Hector Guimard. As curator for the Stewart Program for Modern Design and its International Design Collection, his recent focus has been on creating the Design by Women website, developed in collaboration with the Montreal Museum of Fine Arts. So with that, I welcome you, David, to kick things off, and thank you all again.
Set here technically and get to the right distance. Thank you, Lisa. So I hope that's working. We have a very short time this morning, and I'm going to go faster so Sarah will have more time because she needs it. I'm going to talk about some of the collectors who created Guimard's legacy, and primarily private collectors, and some of these collections have ended up in museums. And certainly the first collectors were the Guimards themselves, and Adeline, Madame Guimard especially, and especially her efforts after Guimard's death in 1942. Preserving the designs from their Rue Mozart house in Paris. But I'm going to leave that for Sarah, because she's going to go into that in much greater detail. I was always fascinated with what the Museum of Modern Art did with the work of Guimard, their early discovery of his work, which was primarily through Alfred Barr, the first director, and it included Philip Johnson, the first curator of architecture, and actually we see the three of them on the trip, their annual trips to Europe to buy art for MoMA and also to organize exhibitions. So that included the very probably met the Guimards, the work on the exhibition Fantastic Art, Dada, and Surrealism in 1936. So they included the work of Guimard, and actually Margaret Barr, the wife, actually took photos of the Metro for the catalog. So there's a whole section of that catalog and a section in the exhibition on in March 1936, Guimard wrote Barr about MoMA's Surrealism exhibition. Probably he was already beginning to think of his legacy, and he described his artistic production, which he divided into 4 periods. And Barr was really identified the aesthetic significance of Guimard's work and his influence on modern artists such as Dali and others. And he said that Guimard, quote, "Guimard has created a new type of biomorphic abstract form." So the Barrs continue to be friends with the Guimards after they moved to New York before the war, and was somewhat upset when there was no article in the New York Times when Guimard, this important Art Nouveau artist, died, and but no obituary, because he had been forgotten. But as Sarah will tell you, Madame Guimard set out to change that trajectory. And MoMA certainly has an extraordinary collection of Guimard's work, probably the most important being Guimard's own desk, which Madame Guimard donated in 1949. And it's interesting, this was this desk was used by the famous director René Darnencourt as his office desk until the curator of design, Arthur Drexler, snatched it from his office and put it on view. So then I need to speak of collectors who you see here, Alain Blondel on the left, and Yves Plantin with their wives here, who began to be interested in Guimard in the 1950s at the École, and was part of a wave of collecting corresponding to the revival of Art Nouveau in the 1960s. And Plantin and Blondel really were pioneers in the movement, the leading Guimard scholars and collectors, as well as dealers. And in 1968, Plantin established the Galerie du Luxembourg, named because it was close to the Palais du Luxembourg. And they also were responsible for an important discovery made of the Guimard's office material, primarily these beautiful drawings. This was in 1968, which had been stored by Guimard before he left for New York in a shed near the orangery at the estate of Saint-Cloud. They were transferred first in 78 to, they established an association, and then they were transferred to the Musée des Arts Décoratifs, and then in 1995, all the documents were donated to the Musée d'Orsay. And here's an example of the drawings. These are on usually a selection of these drawings, including huge working drawings that are really magnificent, are on view at Musée d'Orsay most of the time, and quite remarkable. And they're breathtaking. Then Plantin and Blondel were also instrumental in the organization of the major Art Nouveau shows in the United States, including the exhibition at the Museum of Modern Art in 1970, which you see an installation view here on the left. And there was also an exhibition in 1976 at Rice University, which featured the Menil collection of Saint-Dizier cast iron. So interesting about this exhibition, and there was a plan for a major catalog, but they didn't have the funding, so they just published a very slim catalog. But the research is all in the MoMA archive, so it was very helpful as we organized the present Guimard exhibition to have access to all of the loans, some loans they didn't get, but all the information in the MoMA's archives, which are exemplary archives and open by appointment. Here's an exhibition organized by the Galerie du Luxembourg of Hector Guimard's Font Artistique, one of the first exhibitions on the architect by gallery established in Paris by Plantin in 1968. And from this show, the Menils in Houston purchased a whole collection of Guimard cast iron from the 1971 exhibition, and the works are now in the Menil collection in Houston, and many of them were included in their exhibition I mentioned before, 76 exhibition, Art Nouveau Belgium, France, which I mentioned was curated by Plantin along with Blondel and Yvonne Brunhammer, who's the director of the Musée des Arts Décoratifs in Paris. So there's an example of one of the beautiful cast iron grills, one of quite a few. There are other collections of the grills in addition to the Menil, which is a complete collection that was exhibited at the Rice exhibition of the Saint-Dizier cast iron. And in 1960, there was still a collection at Saint-Dizier too. So this shows how those grills could be used in a residence. So it could be used in a Guimard designed house, or it could be used in the house of another architect. So in addition to the American collections, it is of course the collection of Musée d'Orsay, which must be the most important of the Guimard holdings, which included the drawings and that I just talked about. But in the Wiesbaden Museum, Wiesbaden, Germany, has an important collection of works by Guimard, which were the gift of a major Art Nouveau collector by the name of Ferdinand Nice. So there's Ferdinand Nice in 2017 when he donated the Art Nouveau collection. And the gifts included entire furniture ensembles from Guimard's Castelval and Villa d'Assignan. Also included was a Guimard vitrine exhibited at the Architects' 1903 housing exhibition. So it's a major collection. It includes this Chalmont vase by Sèvres. There are two of these Sèvres vases in the exhibition at the Driehaus Museum, but not this one. These designs for Sèvres were first done for Béranger, but then later produced in not large numbers, but intended to be produced by Sèvres, and all three designs were produced. Also in the Nice collection is this wonderful example of Lustre Lumière. There are manufactured by Langlois under the trade name Lustre Lumière, and they included these suspended icicle-like suspended glass pendants for a range of lamps. And there are quite a few of these in the Richard Driehaus collection, and a few of these are on view in the exhibition. So I'm coming to the collector who was instrumental in the organization of the Guimard exhibition, Richard Driehaus himself, who collected approximately 90 examples of Guimard's design. Co-curator has about 100 Sarah Coffin things, and so it's one of the certainly largest collection, along with Cooper Hewitt in the United States, I think. So anyway, throughout his lifetime, he was really enthusiastic about Guimard, and of course was thrilled to see the proposal for the exhibition, which happened just a few years before he died. So Guimard remained one of his favorite designers throughout his life. This bracket is on display in the exhibition at the Driehaus Museum, and 3 from the collection are also incorporated into a garden bench, also in the exhibition. And I'm going to show you just a couple of views of how Richard Driehaus looked at design to maybe explain why he has a museum and separately a collection, kind of a lending library that I understood was inspired by Guy Brode's similar lending library in LA of contemporary art. But he really felt that he wanted to live with design, needed to be used. He didn't want to see his collection locked up in museum storage and hard to get to or in vitrines. So this is a setting that demonstrates his philosophy, where objects can be viewed in a setting, an interior, in this case his garden, his house in Lake Geneva. And he held this annual summer party, and this was the exhibition theme from the collection in the garden. So you see the Saint-Dizier cast iron displayed with the background of nature. Here's another few views of that. And I think there's always that question of living with design, sort of accessibility to design, but also museum's view of preservation. So I guess Richard Driehaus has both by having the collection and then the museum, which lends to many exhibitions. I understand even recently is lending a lot to exhibitions in the United States. So making it more accessible. So seeing Guimard's work in a setting of nature was really his idea of the same as creating a total work of art in a interior. One from the Metro. And then I wanted to show you an example of one of Richard Driehaus's last acquisitions, this chair from the LeConte tea room, designed by Guimard. When that was acquired by Richard Driehaus, we didn't really know, one of his last acquisitions, we knew it was attributed to Guimard, but we didn't know about the commission. But thanks to the hard work of Olivier Pons, one of several of the scholars at Le Cercle Guimard, they were able to discover that it was designed for LeConte tea room in Paris, and it was written up in Le Cercle Guimard online, and then the initials in the back of the chair were also for the LeConte, the STL on the leather on the back, Salon de Thé, LeConte. So I want to thank you. We have just 15 minutes, and I want to give Sarah, my colleague and co-curator, more time to talk.
morning, everyone. I had the great pleasure of working on Adeline Guimard, someone who was somewhat left out of the earlier conversations, but working at Cooper Hewitt, she was the primary donor, in fact, the only donor almost of Guimard material until I acquired some other pieces. And I felt she must bear a strong element in the story of maintaining Guimard's legacy. She and Hector Guimard married when she was 36 and he was 41. And so this was definitely a partnership that was not about rearing family or anything else. They were devoted, I believe, to each other as well as to a mission. And when she married Guimard and she converted to Catholicism to do so from having been raised Jewish, she met with the priest who was to marry them in a private ceremony and said in French, "Il va falloir que nous fassions de toute notre vie une œuvre d'art," which, as has been translated on David's screen, it will be necessary for us to make of our life a work of art. And this she did, as it turns out, her entire life. In 1900, Guimard branded himself. Did I just go to? Okay. Here they are, in fact. She is wearing a very conservative style of dress. And in fact, we will see that her taste prior to wedding Guimard would give no indication that she would be so devoted to Art Nouveau. Guimard, in many ways, had brought Art Nouveau in his strong expression to Paris after seeing the work of Hector Guimard. He also brought ideas of design reform after the same trip he made, or just shortly there before, to Britain and the design reform movement there. But here they are seen as a couple. Unfortunately, on the slide, you cannot see, I can't really point out, but she has a long chain with a lorgnette on it. And the lorgnette was designed by Guimard with diamonds on it in very Art Nouveau curvilinear form. But it does seem that these accessories, personal accessories, were the area where she supported the mission. But the other odd thing is there's a wedding dress panel from Cooper Hewitt's collection, all beautifully embroidered in the middle, and a perhaps curtain embroidery sample, in any case an embroidery sample. It's hard to imagine her wearing that wedding dress. I have the feeling it may have been a panel that was worn over a rather more conservative dress. There are there are a considerable number of photographs of her, but none of them in anything approaching Art Nouveau style. However, she certainly took it off with a vengeance and partnered with her husband, who had decided he was an architect d'art in the early 1900s, but had dropped that terminology by the time they married in 1909. What does appear to be apparent is that it may have been something approximating a business deal, in the sense that her father was a wealthy investor and knew some Parisian people in the art world as pearl merchants, other jewelers, and it appears that he may have worked, in fact, with some of them and she may have been introduced to Guimard and saw him as something of an art project that she would like to take on. And she herself was a painter. She studied art in Paris. That's why she came to Paris. She was from New York, and although her family had extensive European connections and were married into some of the wealthy Jewish aristocracy of Europe, but she herself had grown up in New York. It perhaps was that Daddy decided that daughter needed to be settled with something. He was getting on in years. At any rate, they only were engaged for 3 weeks in January, from January to February of 1909. And one rather thinks that Guimard had been planning this for a while to somebody, because he seemed to have gone into high gear, and there were many objects that were produced, which I now think explains why there was a delay from 1909 to 1913, when they officially opened the Hôtel Guimard, their house, both as a showroom for his business as well as their residence. And we will see shortly. So I think that although the wedding invitation, or actually announcement, where they announced that they were married and when they would receive, with Guimard's monogram upon the top, which was for G and O, for Guimard and Oppenheim, her maiden name, was all done. But in that interim, the napkin, where he now has Adeline's initial AOG, already done, I suggest was perhaps afterwards to thinking about their future entertaining. And they did indeed have a reception, dinner where they received officially, but it wasn't till 1913. In the meantime, it was clear money changed hands significantly at the time of the wedding, and that money was used to buy a site that Hector had already identified for the house. And the house, whoops, sorry. Yeah, that's right. The house, as you can see on the left, whoops, I'm having a little trouble here with the screen. I will come back to this actually. The house, which was in the 16th, which you will hear far more about later from Isabel, was on an unusually shaped block, but it was organic in shape itself and included everything from another monogram of interlocking H and G over the door, as well as purposely designed rooms, which, as you can be, not only were designed by Guimard, but so were all the furnishings. The chairs individually and beautifully produced by manufacturers whom Guimard had already worked with and designed, except that he expanded his repertoire in keeping with his idea of design for everybody and every level that could be connected to the Metropolitain, that designed with that in mind, so that the lustre lumière that you just saw with David are in fact lighting fixtures produced by a particular company identified to designs that they published and were made available on the commercial market, whether you had a Guimard house or not. But here you see the woodworks, the curtains, which we will go back to in a minute. And that is what one of these panels is on the left. Incredible Art Nouveau ornamentation that is very similar to the gold agate moonstone brooch that does appear to have been, it's in gold, and it does appear to have been Madame Guimard, as she chose to be called, her own personal one. I also would point out that one of the investors in this project was indeed a jeweler who was involved particularly with pearl jewelry, and perhaps this could have even been a Guimard design that he might have sponsored as a wedding present. In any case, there's a distinction between this brooch on the left and the curtains, which are sort of designs of Guimard, but definitely within their house or Adeline in mind, versus the two on the right. The hat pin and the desk seal, while personal to Adeline, and she owned them, she was willing to part with. And if you notice that MoMA got the hat pin and the desk seals, Cooper Hewitt's, because they were in fact production items in gilt bronze, even though she had them, whereas the brooch is something that she gave to she did not give, she kept throughout her life, and it was her nephew who gave it to MoMA after her death. We'll move on. As you can see, this to bring back the point of before and after. Pre her marriage to Hector, she had a studio of her own, and you can see it's full of the sort of late 19th century bric-a-brac, Renaissance-style furniture. You will notice up on the wall in the middle is the same nude painted by Adeline that on the right is in her bedroom at the Hotel Guimard. It is now in the right-hand picture, barely visible, framed in an Hector Guimard frame. Guimardizing, as I might say, as in merchandising, Guimardizing Madame Guimard's taste. And again, all the fixtures in the room, including the light, the lumière lumière, are on the ceiling, are indeed his designs. The next image is a very, again, a contrast of, oops, it seems to be going on its own here, apologies. is a platter on the left, painted when it's signed, A. Oppenheim. So we know it's painted before she was married. Appears to be late 19th century, perhaps when she went to visit her sister who was living in Vienna at the time. In any case, it is an Augarten porcelain plate from Vienna of the late 19th century with one of the factory borders. But Adeline herself painted the painting after Rubens that was in the Kunsthistorisches Museum at the time, showing a considerable artistic proficiency, but at the same time, clearly an interest in old masters and traditional art. On the right is a drawing she did, showing, which is hard to see because it's quite faint. It came to the Cooper Hewitt in that Guimard frame, and she gave them as a duo, and I think it was to show their partnership, that it was her drawing that he had designed a frame for. And as you will see, here it is, on the wall, above that table. Sorry, I'm not getting the pointer to work here. There we go. So here you have the drawing. That is the drawing in that frame, foreshortened in the picture. And below it is the gilt copper calling card tray underneath it. And on the mantelpiece is this photograph of Hector, her husband, in one of his gilt bronze frames that were definitely marketed commercially on their own, on a fireplace that you should take note of because it's about to appear. In any case, this was clearly Adeline's salon. You can see she had the loose lumiere, but there are a lot of other pieces that have nothing to do, sculptures and so on, that don't have anything to do with Hector Guimard. And one of their messages was, I think, in showing you how you could make your lifestyle Art Nouveau, even if you had things that weren't by Guimard. Here, this is something I sort of recently re-looked at. It's the exhibition catalog for the Salon des Artistes Décorateurs in Paris of 1911. And as you will see on the top, the vice president is, in fact, Monsieur and Madame Mazzara, about whom you will hear more from Nicolas, but also as vice president, along with Monsieur, Madame Guimard. And down below, even more interesting, is the fact, membre du comité. The comité really wrote up the thesis. They're the only ones, Monsieur and Madame Guimard. So this is important. She was in the committee about the statements, the mission of the Société des Artistes Décorateurs. It was not merely Hector. This was a partnership for sure. And then, I just sort of made this terrible mess of yellow, but it's going to read to you. But basically, it was saying that everybody, all the French, should understand that the modern movement is not simply an aesthetic whim, but it's responding to pressing needs to actually offer sort of a national style and sort of to get together to be in solidarity with the artists who are collaborating actively, the renewal and of the French decorative arts and the creation of a 20th century style. That is virtually the same verbiage you can find in endless lectures by Hector Guimard. He taught a lot, he lectured a lot, so I think we can fairly safely assume that he essentially authored this, perhaps working with the others. And here there was a list of what was exhibited, and this is part of the list, which actually, and shows him now, it says, living in 122 Rue Mozart, which was their joint house, although not officially open. Sculpture, un cheminée de salon, marbre et bronze. Well, I think that's the one that you saw in the salon, but if not, it's one of several that you can see in the picture up above that it's marbre et bronze. And then serviette, those are the napkins that we saw earlier, and it tells you who made them. The plateau en bronze is almost certainly the card tray that we saw in the other room, because it's the only piece that the Musée des Arts Décoratifs bought of Hector Guimard prior to being given some things by the Nozal family and later being given some archival material by Madame Guimard. In any case, it included Madame Guimard's own pendant and her own engagement ring. So even that, as well as his cane, was put forward as something you could actually order, designed by Guimard. Coming to America, which they did in 1938, because she feared of being of Jewish heritage, that both the political situation was getting bad, but also they both had very left-wing socialist connections, and particularly Hector, and she supported him in all of those. So we will see later with Barry some of the projects of his sort of social conscience and modernism that they brought with them to the U.S. and or had sent to. So the standard construction designs that he saw in the future, that he and his ideal of the working with people was very much one that was idealism, but also where his future might lie. Even though he crowned his style as the Style Guimard, he was essentially shot himself in the foot with that, because ultimately people so associated him with Art Nouveau, they couldn't believe that he beat Le Corbusier to prefabrication. So I think he thought of himself as a modernist design, and in fact, one of the things that when she went back to Paris, and with this I will conclude, that she went back to Paris after the war. They moved in 1938 as refugees. She had to actually take back her American citizenship, which she'd given up in getting married, showing her commitment to him and the cause. And the fact that that her archives ended up, despite this trip to Paris in 1948, when she tried to give the house away, perhaps to be a museum, and then ended up placing rooms, one in the Musée de Lyon, which is where he was born, and one in Paris, which is now in the Petit Palais, of her bedroom. One was the bedroom, one was the dining room, that are not set up exactly as they had been, but close. The fact that she was unable, it was a period when Art Nouveau was totally out of fashion, that she did give some archives to the Musée des Arts Décoratifs library, but they were not taking objects at that point. So she came back to the US, and it is because of that that although the Americans did not have a strong legacy in Art Nouveau themselves, that we have this rich trove, primarily thanks to collectors like Richard Driehaus, but also to her gifts, to Cooper Hewitt, to MoMA, to the Metropolitan Museum, to Avery Library at Columbia, and to the Philadelphia Museum, all of whose curators and directors she was introduced to by Alfred Barr. And I just wanted to say that she included in this gift to Cooper Hewitt even a catalog for the study and propaganda of the International Pax State, because of both of their belief in the World War I peace movement, and she did drawings and sold them off for the benefit of the soldiers and the Red Cross, and had exhibitions which she promoted with equal zeal to Guimard and his postcards. And lastly, I would just want to say there has been some historical controversy about whether the Guimards wanted to have a museum in their own house. And in fact, the New York Public Library archives, which I think were originally put with Cooper Union, the predecessor institution in which the Cooper Hewitt was housed, all these letters that were then transferred to the New York Public Library that provide such a rich reserve. And I just want to quote a letter. One of Hector Guimard's old friends, who was himself an architect, was a man named Auguste Bluisen. I'm not sure about the pronunciation. In 1939, Hector Guimard wrote to Bluisen asking him to take whatever he wanted from the Avenue Mozart house, which they kept despite moving around the time of the crash to smaller quarters, and discuss sending pieces and removing some plaster models that were saved with the aim of creating a museum in the Hotel Guimard. And he refers to himself as, like Bluisen, as one of the precursors of modern art, showing the impact of what Barr had felt. I mean, he's citing what Barr felt about him and used to talk about Guimard at MoMA, that he already understood himself to be one of the precursors of modern art and why he should be in the Museum of Modern Art, but the fact that he referred specifically to the plaster casts being with the intention of having them in a museum at the Avenue Mozart, their house. So she kept on giving these things right through the late 40s after she got back from Paris, the 50s, up until her death, and at least had the opportunity to see that she died in 1965, so she wasn't around at the time of the 1970 exhibition, but she was around to understand that people were appreciating Art Nouveau again, and the kind of partnership and the devotion about making her life and his a unified work of art. It shows up in Cooper's Hewitt's collections, but also throughout their legacy. Thank you.
Okay. Welcome to all of you, Hectorologues. This is the word we use to designate all people interested in Hector Guimard. As president of the Cercle Guimard, I'm pleased and proud to be here in Chicago to present you the project our association is promoting for the creation of a Guimard Museum in the Hotel Mezzara. First of all, isn't it astonishing that Hector Guimard, one of the leading exponents of French Art Nouveau, who shaped the public area, public space of Paris with his famous cast iron entrance to the metro, doesn't have a museum dedicated to his work? Not really. When I was an architecture student, Hector Guimard was considered as an anecdote of art history. Thanks to the major monographic exhibition, thanks to the community of historians and searchers, the architect has reached deserved international renown. But there's still work to be done. The creation of the Guimard Museum in Paris seems so obvious, although you will discover that in reality it's so complicated. In this presentation, I'm going to introduce you to Le Cercle Guimard, to the Hotel Mezzara, and the connection between our association and this building, Hector Guimard Diffusion as partner of the project, and all efforts we've made to develop a museum project and the future prospect. Now, let's start a few words about the Cercle Guimard. There are many stories surrounding Hector Guimard. The architect's stories, the stories of Adeline Guimard and her efforts to preserve her husband's memories, and finally, the story of the rediscovery of his work in the 60s by a handful and determined people. Today, Le Cercle Guimard continues this story by trying to create the Guimard Museum and by having the first Hectorologues and their archive on its board of directors. Le Cercle Guimard is a not-profit association recognized for the public interest. It was created in 2003, and on this side you can meet our team. Our office is located in Castelbéranger, in the Guimard studio. We have currently 250 members, and our financial resources come mainly from donation and membership fees, as well as a subvention from the City of Paris. Le Cercle Guimard was created to have a legal structure, to bring together researchers and lovers of art nouveau, to become a place of sharing and learning, to facilitate access to and to understanding its works, and to promote the work of Hector Guimard. Le Cercle Guimard organizes its activity around research. On this slide, you can discover some of our discoveries. It also makes inventory that are essential to measure the depth and diversity of Hector Guimard's work. For example, inventory of ornamental cast iron, furniture, or ceramics. To share our research, the association has its own website, lecercleguimard.fr, to publish articles, and its own publishing house, les éditions du Cercle Guimard. For several years, Le Cercle Guimard, in collaboration with Nicolas Horiot, an American citizen, digitized the surviving works of Hector Guimard. In this video, you can see the scanned Guimard studio, where we have reinstalled the period cast iron fireplace from a private collection. It's a beginning. Let's talk about the special relationships between our association and the Hotel Mézara. The Hotel Mézara is a private townhouse which was built in 1910 by Hector Guimard for Paul Mézara, a textile designer and manufacturer. It's located in Auteuil district, where most of the architects' buildings can be found, including Le Castelbéranger, le Hotel Guimard, as well as other examples of modernists by Perret Brothers, Le Corbusier, Henri Sauvage, or Mallet Stevens. The following slides show the drawings for the building permit. You can admire the architect's unique design. Here are the oldest photos we have. Today, the ornate cast iron gutters and the planters, garden planters here, and gutters here, and the cap roof here are missing. We plan to restore them if we succeed in creating the Guimard Museum. The building is well preserved. It has an exceptional decoration, largely imagined by the architect, woodwork, staff work, artistic cast iron, fireplace, stained glasses, mosaics, and more. It's a generous, scenic, pre-reception area on the ground floor are ideal for welcoming the public. The dining room is a treasure. Its decor and furniture signed by Guimard were designed especially for this space. It is an invaluable asset for the creation of a museum. Since 1956, the Hotel Mézara has belonged to the French state. It has been purchased from the La Cascade sister for use as residential school for young girls. The building was listed as historic monument in 2016. From the beginning of the association, the management allowed us to open the door of the Hotel Mezzara to organize events during school vacation and weekends. So now let's look at 3 examples to illustrate our activities. Here, 2 exhibition posters on the right. It's our first exhibition, Album d'un collectionneur, which was also presented at the Horta Museum in Brussels. The idea was to discover Guimard through postcards. In 2019, we put together an incredible collection of chairs for the filming of French TV show. And, just for you, we were pleased to welcome Barbara Streisand for a private visit. All this time spent at the Hotel Mezzara allowed us to become familiar with the building and to study it in details. This enabled us, for instance, to design the model plans for exhibitions celebrating the century of Gaudí's Casa Milà in Barcelona in 2012, or to restore its selling and staff, part of its collapse during one of our exhibitions, and to write a book about Hotel Mezzara. Indeed, during all these years, thanks to Le Cercle Guimard, the Hotel Mezzara was already receiving public as it was a museum. In September 2050, the residential school was closed. The aim of the French state is to get rid of the Hotel Mezzara. We welcome this wonderful opportunity to create a Guimard museum on this site. At the time, we couldn't imagine the difficulties we would have to face. During the first years, we had to inform the cultural and political circle of the situation, but we soon realized that the state was not interested in investing in the creation of the museum. So, and this was a very important step. In 2017, the board of the Cercle Guimard invested all its financial resources to organize a major exhibition at the Hotel Mezzara. Hector Guimard, précurseur du design. Our objectives were clear: attract the public, communicate our museum project, and find sponsors. The exhibition was a great success. Coinciding with the 150th anniversary of the Architects' Bureau, we welcomed 13,000 visitors over 11 weekends. That was a lot. The press jumped on the event with headlines such as Hector Guimard awaits his museum, Hotel Mezzara return to Guimard, Hotel Mezzara future temple of Art Nouveau. And guess what? Incredibly and surprisingly, our strategy worked. A few months later, we met Fabien Chaunet. This French entrepreneur has a passion for cultural heritage. He immediately saw the project's potential. He described it as promising in terms of tourism appeal and exciting for scientific and cultural community. He created the company Hector Guimard Diffusion and signed an agreement with Le Cercle Guimard. Together, we are taking concrete action to build our private Guimard museum project and to establish contract with potential museum partners. First, Le Cercle Guimard opens its archive center to provide the museum with documentary resources. Today, it gathers several collections, including those of Alain and Michel Blondel, the photographer Laurent Sully-Jones. It's the photographer who followed Alain and Michel during their discovery. It's a photography. Fabien Chaunet and Le Cercle Guimard are each building a collection of Guimard works for the museum. Le Cercle Guimard, founded by the first pieces of furniture dating from 1893. On the right, bronze candle holder. An original drawing by Adeline Guimard, but we don't know who is portrayed. Ceramics, and more. Fabien Chenet has become one of the most important Guimard collectors in France. Today, he owns the vitrine from the Hotel Guimard Salon, who he bought it from an American collector. He came back in France. The Guimard, the Castel Béranger Lavabo, a large number of Castellan, artistic Castellan pieces, mirror, ceramics, a wide range of lustre lumière, all documents, and more. To support the project, we have also set up a scientific committee chaired by the architect Maurice Culot, founder of the AAM edition and winner of the 2019 Treehouse Prize. It's all the team in Hotel Mézard. We contacted elected officials and heads of institutions, Art Nouveau Network, and companies to convince them of the merits of our project and to forge strong links in anticipation of future partnership with the museum. Today, the Ministry of Culture, the City of Paris, the Orsay Museum support our project. So, what kind of museum do you want to create? The Guimard Museum project is first and foremost the discovery of a building designed by Hector Guimard. Every effort will be made to enhance the building's facade and the decoration of its interiors, including the dining room. The exhibition spaces will be spread between the ground floor and the first floor. In terms of museography, the project will alternate between period rooms and more neutral room for interpretation and discovery of Guimard's work. Now let's look at some of our ideas for the museum. On this slide, some ambient view of a great hall and a room dedicated to the metro. We will use the digital tools to discover and understand inaccessible and destroy buildings. For example, the magnificent Humbert de Romans concert hall. In the 700 square meters landscape garden, the project includes the reconstruction of the monumental gate of the lost Bastille and Étoile station. In the meantime, since September 2015, we have been discussing with the French administration to have the right to operate the Hotel Mézard, because there is no equivalent building to home the Guimard Museum. All of our Guimard buildings are private or residential. To tell you, all the twists and turns of the process will take a long time. Simply put, the Hotel Mézard was one of the first buildings to fall under the French government's new heritage policy. Instead of selling off the remarkable buildings, the government is keeping them and offering long-term lease. After several years of waiting, the first call for candidates for a 50-year long-term lease was launched in March 2021. Our team responded with a very detailed proposal. Unfortunately, the French government was not satisfied with the financial part and declared the call unsuccessful. Last April, 2 years later, a second call for candidates was launched for an 80-year lease. As the financial conditions were too restrictive, Le Cercle Guimard and Hector Guimard Diffusion took the difficult decision not to submit a proposal. It was a terrible disappointment after 8 years' efforts. But once again, the call for candidates were declared unsuccessful. What does it mean? We are back in the race and even more motivated. To put in a nutshell, today, Le Cercle Guimard, a non-profit association, has existed for over 20 years. Together with Fabien Chonnet, private partner, we have gathered enough material to start immediately the creation of a museum, Guimard Museum, at the Hotel Mezar. So what is needed? The French government needs a larger financial counterpart in order to allocate the long-term lease. This is now our main concern, to find other financial partners and donors willing to support the creation of the Guimard Museum. In the incoming weeks, the site will probably launch a third call for candidates. This time, we must succeed. We must take the dream of Adeline and Hector Guimard dreams come true. Thanks.